Yeah.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of A Stranger Perspective podcast, a podcast dedicated to the idea that our lives are always better when we learn to listen to and consider the points of view of other people. Today, we have our good friend, Troielle. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. How are you guys?
I'm doing good. How are you,
Pretty
Melina?
good. We're pretty excited that you're here.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, it's especially exciting because you were like one of the very first people that we realized was like deconstructing with us, you know, like we were kind of on that journey, what felt like, you know, on our own, like Melina and I think we're lucky to have each other, but we like freaked out when we met you because it was like, oh my gosh, someone who's like us and gets it, like came from the same kind of church background.
Literally. We said we were like living the same life, but just in different sides of the city. Like it's crazy.
And we were quarantined somewhat together during our deconstruction. And we would call it church when we get together and smoke weed and just talk about our journeys.
Ash on the carpet.
Ash on the carpet. That means that we were just at a point where we're like, just ash on the carpet. It doesn't matter. We'll vacuum it. While we're sitting there watching Beyonce perform at Coachella.
We had some good times.
Yeah. It was the beginning of our friendship was like very sweet and continued.
We kind of just like all dove in because well, this is all new to me, the deconstruction, that whole thing. I didn't even know there was a word for it. And when I found out, I was like, oh, this is what this is called. What am I doing besides backsliding and going to hell?
And we found the liturgist together too. That was a very helpful podcast to understand what even was going on with us.
What's happening. Yeah.
Dang. Well, we kind of told our story about how we went through and started deconstructing and everything on our first episode. But do you want to share a little bit about how that whole process started for you? Like you grew up in the church your whole life, and then how did the first little pieces of your faith start changing?
Yeah. So I was on staff, leading worship, doing the whole thing, like very involved in youth ministry and that whole thing. And my deconstruction it started honestly with a prophetic word. I got a prophetic word from a well-known prophet, and he came, gave me this word, and I ran with it. Like it literally awakened something in me that had been lying dormant for years. And so I felt like, oh my gosh, this is really God. This is really true. And what the word was just about like my future, just dreams that I had laid down. I wanted to always be a singer. I wanted to always do film and just all that kind of stuff. And at the time, I was like, okay, God, if this isn't what you want for me, I'll lay it all down. Like I'll just lead worship for the rest of my life. And, you know, I've gotten so many words about worship and doing all that stuff. So I was like, this is it. This is my path, you know, and I'll lay that down. And so when I got that prophetic word, it kind of like awakened all of that like the dreams inside of me. And so I began to chase that. And as I began to chase that, the community that I was a part of wasn't as supportive as I was hoping they would be. And that's when I kind of to realize like something's not right here. So I would say that kind of really began my questioning of like, what is it? What's going on?
Like God, like this prophetic word was supposed to be like from like the mouth of God, basically.
Literally.
And so if it doesn't come to pass, what does that mean?
Exactly.
Did you ever think like, did you struggle with the question of like, before going to like your faith being maybe questioning your faith generally, did you go to first like the question of like, was that prophetic word maybe like just a bad prophetic word, or that God didn't really give me a real one?
I never questioned that because it was too specific. It was way too specific. It was like it called out things that I hadn't even thought about in years. So I was like,
so he said things about your life to kind of confirm that
he called out on my birthday and my birthplace, which was Buffalo, New York. And so then I stood up and he's like, you know, I just see the music industry all over you. I see that you're kind of like a force, which like my family like has this joke of like, because my name is Troielle, which Troy means like a destroyer. And so like I always break things. Like I'm always like, I don't know my own strength sometimes. And so we have this joke about just like, and so he basically called out about like, you know, you were born in Buffalo because that's like, you know, you're going to be like this force that goes through the music industry and like rampages through, like it just, I don't know what it was, but it really resonated. It's just one of those things where you're like, what? And I felt like it was really God. And so, so once I got that word, I was kind of like, this is it. This is what I need to be doing. And I thought that like everybody around me would kind of like help me get to that place, but it was kind of like, meh, praise God. That's awesome. And so it just kind of like, that's when I began to question. The anger I felt like towards my belief and like Christianity, that didn't come till a lot later. But I would say that that's where it started, because then I started to question like,
oh, I see.
what, if this isn't like being supported, like this is literally, why wouldn't you help someone?
So your question was more with the church and like how the church responded than it was like that word of prophecy being true or false or something.
Right. Okay. And I still believed in Jesus at the time, and I still believed in God, but I was like, I can't be a part of community that's not. And it wasn't just that. There was other stuff that I began to question about too. Our church got really heavily involved with politics. That was the year of 2016, like with the whole Trump election and everything. And there was just a lot of stuff that I felt like they weren't considering people in the church. And so it just a lot of like hurt. And so from there, I went into this like rebellion of like, fuck everybody, fuck the church. Like I'm not doing God. I love Jesus. I love, but I can't be a part of this community. I can't be a part of this. And so I kind of
so biased.
Yeah. And so I went and kind of just like wasn't going to any church for a while. And I'm like, I'm just doing my own thing. I kept calling it. People were like, where are you now? Where are you going? I'm around. That was my like.
None of your business.
I hate everybody. No.
The only thing I wanted to like backtrack on a little bit from what you're talking about was, I don't know if everyone understands this, because I didn't grow up with a prophet that would have this gift. So you guys would have a prophet come to the church and he would just call out and almost do like psychic readings, but it's called prophetic readings over people. Okay. So that's what happened.
Yeah. So he, this specific prophet, he would just pray beforehand and just get random details. And then he'd go that night and just call it out and people would respond to it. But yeah, this word was so specific, and yeah, it was really cool. So
dang, that's crazy. So was it weird that like he called out such a specific, such specific details about your life, and then the actual prophecy of like your future, like not coming to pass or something? Or
was it weird that it didn't come to pass?
Or did it come to pass? Or
I feel like I'm living in it now.
Oh, okay.
Which is the irony of it all.
Interesting.
Because here I am like completely, stepped away from my faith as far as like how I believed then. And now I'm like, oh, that word is like ringing true. Like now I'm remembering things, and I don't know. So it's kind of,
I love that for you.
But you eventually like made your way back to the church, I think, right?
I did.
You were going when we first met, I think.
Yeah. So I left and got a real job in the real world and did that for 3 years and was kind of just really angry and broken. That wasn't I felt like I was free because I was out of the church, but not really, because I was hurt. So, and that's a prison in itself, right? So then, I became so angry. I really struggled with depression for the first time since high school. And I thought Jesus had took that away. And turns out it was always there. And so I got really depressed and got even like suicidal and just like thinking about really heavy things that scared me. And so of course, naturally I ran back to the church because I was like, maybe I am backsliding. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I need to give God another shot. Maybe I need to, because I was just terrified. Like, I'm like, I haven't been that like low. Is this in a like very
is
long
God
time.
Punishing me for my disobedience?
Right. Like, am I so far backslidden that like now I'm depressed and now I can't see or feel or hear or anything? So I ran back to the church and got involved in another church. And that was like my last hurrah. Like I felt like I jumped on and was like, help. And I was just slipping, like grasping for any kind of truth. But I had already changed too much. So I couldn't go back to that same way of believing. And that's when I would say the deconstruction actually like began.
Like the crisis of faith actually started kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I remember when you were in that church, it was 2020, you were going to that church and you were leading worship. And I remember you really struggling and being at war with yourself about what songs you felt you could sing and what you couldn't sing.
Yeah.
Because your beliefs were changing. You're like, I don't believe this song anymore.
I can't sing it
I can't
anymore.
sing it.
Yeah.
And you were just like, I'm not going to sing that song. I'm sorry. But I will sing this song and I'll sing this song. Yeah. I remember that was really challenging for you.
It was so rough. And like, you don't realize how many songs are like, because to me, okay, so Kim Walker, who's a worship leader with Jesus Culture, she said years ago, like, I don't sing anything that I don't believe. And I really took that to heart. So every song that I picked when I did set lists and stuff, like I believed these songs, like I lived it. And so I'm still the same way. Like, I'm not going to get up there and sing something that I'm not really believing. And so when I was like changing my beliefs, I'm like, the songs are getting smaller and smaller. I'm like, I think I have like 3 songs I can
doing
sing
the same
now.
ones every week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was really difficult. But
by the way, you do have a very beautiful, beautiful voice.
Thank you.
It holds so much space It really does. It like just captivates so many people. I love your voice.
Thank you.
And I love the new music that you're writing right now.
Thank you.
Very impressed.
I'm excited.
So cool. One thing you said that I thought was really interesting is how like when you come back, like you kind of walked away from the church for a while and then started to go through some difficulties. The depression came back and all that. I feel like that's one of the most confusing parts of going through like any kind of crisis of faith because you're taught that if that happens to you, if you stop going to church and if bad things are going to start happening to you because God's not with you anymore because you're disobedient. And it's almost like it could, in a way, you're like taught that that's the confirmation that God is there and you're wrong.
Right.
But like when you get back into, you talked about that experience about getting back into the church and like kind of being like, okay, I'm coming back because obviously this is God, you know, a result of me not following Jesus closely enough. Like how like difficult was that experience of like starting to realize, oh, this wasn't me. This wasn't happening because I was far from Jesus or something, but it was happening because my life was changing. And that's depression is a natural part of loss and confusing times. Like,
well, during so I was really depressed in high school. It caused me to drop out. So I'm a high school dropout. And,
so was Tony, last guy we had on.
Oh yeah. We're special, those high school dropouts. But no, so yeah, I dropped out and just really depressed and was really low until I found Jesus for real. Like I've always been saved growing up and that whole thing, but I like really dedicated my life at 17 and I was like, this is it. I'm going to die for Jesus. I'm going to do it all. I jumped into ministry school, jumped into full-time ministry and just never quit for 10 years.
And everything really clicked for you at that time in real life, right?
In real life, yeah, it was real. None of it was fake. Like I really did just jump into it and loved all of it. But what I noticed is that I never dealt with the original feelings. I thought I did, but I didn't really. So when they came back 10 years later, it was kind of like, I realized it had always been there.
Oh, you just suppressed it.
It was just like covered up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was almost like, hey, remember me? I'm back. And I was like, oh God, no, this must mean I'm really far from Jesus. I'm really far. Like I need to go back. And that's what kind of like scared me. It literally scared me.
How do you think that all got like buried underneath you? Do you think it was busyness?
Oh yeah. A mixture of busyness, a mixture of in Jesus' name, it's gone. We pray away depression. We take depression off of people. We take anxiety off of people because everything's a spirit. So like the spirit of depression, the spirit of anxiety, the spirit of this, we break it right now in Jesus' name. It's canceled. You're no more. So move forward.
What do you believe about that now? You don't think it's a spirit anymore. What are those emotions?
I think that depression, and don't get me wrong, I think there are imbalances where, every person's different. So I'm not going to go and say that every person's depression is this, but a lot of times it is where it's a warning. It's from your body telling you that something's off. And I think that if you pay attention to your depression, you can actually learn a lot from yourself and save yourself. But so many people are taught to avoid it and they're taught to suppress it or stuff it down, especially in Christianity. And then you never deal with it. You never get to the nitty gritty of why it's even there or why it's popping up.
Right.
So
those emotions of depression, anxiety, stress, panic, fear, whatever it might be, those are all messengers to lead you towards your healing.
Absolutely. I agree.
And I love that, like, what seemed to be a result of disobedience and sin actually turned out to be your first step of healing.
Absolutely. Because, it was a setup.
Yeah. Like it's confusing because at first you're like, well, this depression's coming back because, I've been disobedient. But in reality, what was being used to cover up, those wounds and what was causing that depression was finally lifted in a sense. And it was able to like come out to be dealt with.
Dealt with.
And I kind of just want to say, I can't believe it that in the church, we literally would rebuke fear and rebuke depression in the name of Jesus. Get out of here, fear. And like we would rebuke it like it was this evil thing. Yeah. But really it was only just the thing that we needed to acknowledge to bring more healing and wholeness into our lives. And I just think that's kind of sad that that's how we viewed those emotions. And that's why we suppressed it. That's why we got really busy.
Yeah, well, not only in the church.
Don't focus on it, just focus on, things that are lovely and pure, which, don't get me wrong, I think you should, but at the same time, it's like you still have to deal with those emotions, those things, the trauma, all that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely, one of the things that kind of like when it comes to talking about how the church, some of the difficulties of like being in the church for a long time is it's like, I think a lot of times we get things from like Christian culture that aren't even necessarily what the Bible says or what the Bible was intending, So it's like, and it's a result of like, we're in a Western culture and we kind of honestly, like a lot of sermons and teachings are pretty superficial,
Yeah.
And if there is, like studying going on behind
the Hollywood
it,
preachers.
Yeah, exactly. They'll say like, you need to think, like dwell on things that are pure, lovely, of good repute, all that stuff. Like, you might get that sermon or whatever, but it's not necessarily the Bible saying like, you can't think about the negative emotions, because you also have the Psalms and all these other things where it's like fully acknowledged,
Right.
But we take some of those things from Christian culture and I think it kind of ends up like screwing us up a little bit. And one thing that is kind of interesting to me is how many people kind of think that the only reason you deconstruct is because of church hurt, is because
trauma, and you're not healed and you're
Do you feel like the church hurt was like the cause of your deconstruction, or was it just like the thing to show you?
It wasn't church hurt anymore. By the time that I had actually deconstructed to where I'm like, I don't even know about this Jesus thing anymore, you guys. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I believe in Jesus, but not in the way that I used to. So I'm like, it was just I was scared because, nobody talks about that. It's blasphemous, So,
yeah. So like when you go through those experiences in the church and you're like, you get, we talked about it earlier, like gaslighting in a sense, like, okay, you're just backslidden. Okay. You're just far from Jesus. Yeah. Oh, it's just church hurt. And in a way it's kind of like like not acknowledging the reality of like some of these questions that people have sometimes.
I spent like a really long time defending myself, even in my head, to old pastors and leaders that I felt like would be like, oh, she's just offended or she's just hurt and she's, going off and doing all this out of hurt. She's spreading her, offense or whatever to other people. And it's kind of like bringing people down. I wrestled with that for a really long time. And there was a lot of guilt and shame. And I would go in these cycles of just like, who do you think you are? What are you doing? And it was constantly questioning myself, and it was torture. It was absolute torture.
I can relate to that so much.
Me too.
I can relate to that
when we were
so
deconstructing, we felt the same emotions. We were like, I hate that I'm questioning. I hate that I'm feeling this way because I do not want to mislead people.
Right.
I do not want to deceive people or get them to question their faith because I'm doing it.
Right.
And that was like a really confusing time. And that was the part where I think all of us had to decide, are we going to care more about what other people think? And, or are we just going to be true to ourselves, and ask these questions and not care how we do care how it affects other people, but we're not asking or responding in a way because of other people. We're doing this for our own healing and our own journey.
Yeah. I
think my deconstruction kind of started out of a desire to want to know the Bible well enough to not deceive people. Because I talked about in the first podcast, but the church we came from versus the church we went to were very different. So I just wanted to like dive into the questions of like, okay, I want some clarity for myself.
Right.
So I can be confident of, which views I'm espousing basically.
Yeah.
And that was it was out of that motivation to like helping people, that I like fell face first in like deconstruction. I was like, damn it, this went horribly wrong.
How did this happen? Yeah.
But yeah, and like once you start down that path of like asking the questions, like I think I went through the same thing though, where I went back and forth, like, oh, I'm being disobedient. No, this seems like it's really happening. No, I'm just being disobedient.
Yeah.
And then eventually there comes this point where like, I know for me, it kind of clicked where I think I realized like I actually stopped believing a while back, but I like my mind, my patterns of my life
holding on to everything
wouldn't let me accept that reality. Did you have a moment like that?
I think I did. Like the whole time I was when I went back to church and I was like trying to get involved in ministry again, and I'm like leading worship and I'm like trying to search, and it wasn't there. It was not there. And I realized that like a while ago, even before I had ran back to the church, I'm like, yeah, I kind of let go of this, but I was grasping like that. That's the only word. I was just grasping for something. And like we had joked about, I went back to my Spotify, just like recent songs that I'd played. And it was all the worship music that like moved me when I was a Christian. And I was going back to it, searching for some truth, something to move me, something to bring me back in. And there was nothing there. Yeah. And it was awful. It was so depressing.
Zack had the same moment at church when he was just raising his hands and then he was like, I don't believe this anymore.
That was my moment where I realized like I stopped believing
in the middle of worship.
Like, yeah. Jeez. Yeah.
I had that moment Easter Sunday. It sucked.
That's a rough one.
Yeah, it really did.
Now looking, but then I'm sure it was.
I was singing a song that was talking about the gospel and the resurrection as literal and all that, and I'm just like, I do not know if I believe this, and I'm singing this, and it was very sad because I felt guilty about it.
Yeah, I think that's important to know. Like I've said it a few times, on other episodes, but like I really feel like deconstruction is something that happens to you, not necessarily something you choose to do.
Absolutely.
And that makes a big difference because when we're Christians, we think like the only reason they would deconstruct is because they chose to be disobedient, because they chose to like walk away. But it's like once your brain clicks with some of these questions and you realize, hey, there is a flaw here, or hey, there is room to question here. This isn't perfectly clear. There are other explanations for my experiences within the church and for, things that are written in scripture that, are different from what I believe and as legitimate as the things I believe.
Right.
That's where you're like, that's where I felt like my feet slipped and I just like slid down the hill and I couldn't stop myself, And
deconstruction doesn't have to look like you completely losing your faith or letting go of your faith. It could be just even adjusting on how you believe. I think like when the whole Black Lives Matter thing happened and in the church, a lot of Christians were like, wait a minute, like I've just changed, like what I used to think about this versus what I think about this now. And that kind of changes how you view God and how you view your whole Christian, you know what I mean? So a lot of people deconstructed a little bit, even if they didn't let go of that believing in Christ, but just like, well, actually, I don't know how I feel about that anymore. And actually, I thought I had made up my mind on this. And that's really what it is. And one of the girls in my youth group, when I was in youth group, she's amazing now. She just graduated college. But she said, she came on our podcast and she goes, everybody has a room. And I'm going to butcher this, but everybody has a room. And basically, you have to decide that you are given when you grow up. And you get to a point where you have to decide if you're going to rearrange the room completely, if you're going to keep everything the way it is. And that's like your responsibility. And I love that picture because I'm like, this is me rearranging my spiritual beliefs so that I can function as a human. I can't go on just keeping the room the same just because it's how it's always been. And that's how my mom believed and my grandma believed and my great grandma believed. Like I have to do what's best for me. And that seems so selfish and that seems so worldly. And so I really struggled with that. But like you said, you get to this point where you're like, I have to do me. I can't keep carrying the expectations of everybody around me just to please them when I'm dying inside. Like I have to do this,
And I think you get to I felt like I got to this point where I was like, hey, if I'm not trusting where my intuition is leading me with this, if I'm not trusting where my judgment is leading me with this, then I should be more scared of being deceived in that state,
Right.
Like if this really is the truth, then I truly have nothing to be afraid of by asking these questions, And if you like the kind of red flag can be if you're at this point where you're not even willing to look at the issues, if you're not even willing to question,
And what I think is unfair that we've been taught is that the heart is deceitfully wicked in many ways. Yeah. So you can't trust your feelings. You cannot trust your intuition. Sorry.
You can't trust yourself.
You can't.
All. Yeah.
And you hear that in the church at times and just in religious sects in general, where they're like, no, you're wrong. You can't trust your emotions. They're evil. They're bad. You have to trust the infallible word of God, which that's a problem.
Yeah. I think that's where like the control comes in too, because it's so easy to manipulate people who are in that mindset of, I can't trust myself. I can't trust anything. I should go to a leader. I should go to a pastor. I need to, before I make any decision in my life, I need to go to a leader. And don't get me wrong, I believe in trusting wise counsel, but there's just like it's too much of a, like people can slide in and kind of, ulterior motives can kind of kick in.
Well, I remember Zack and I, we would be like, oh my God, I don't know what I think about this issue or this topic about XYZ. I need to go gauge and see if I'm on the right track with my pastor. And we would do that. And we're like, oh yeah, he knows. And we would always just like lean and depend on the opinion of the spiritual leader that was in our life at the time. And one thing that I think we're maturing from just as a collective, as humanity, is you don't need to always depend on your leader, your guru, your pastor, your self-help book. It's intuition. Right here. It's right here.
And I do think it's important that you build that because, you know, for me, it was very important because like I said, spent 10 years of suppressing that. Troielle, you're stupid. You know, you make really dumb decisions. You really need Jesus.
Are you smarter than the pastor?
Yeah,
Are
you really need your pastor. You really need your leader. Like you are not gonna. And I told myself that and I believed it. And so when I started to like really follow my intuition, that was like groundbreaking for me because I was like, oh my gosh, like this is God. I do hear the Holy Spirit. Like I do hear God. I do hear source. Like it is within me where I had looked outward for so long. So,
wow. So a question for you about your journey of deconstruction. So when you realized I don't believe this anymore, what direction did you take after that? You quit your job at the last church that you were at last year, right?
Yeah. So, I left there and it was a good parting. So
that's beautiful.
But yeah, I left there and I just kind of wasn't sure. And for the first time ever, it felt good to not have a plan. And I was kind of just like, people were like, what are you doing now? I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just going with the flow. So I jumped out of that and then just kind of like really dove into kind of whatever I was always interested in, but was afraid to.
What was that?
Same. I did the same stuff.
Yeah, like astrology being one of them. I actually really loved astrology all through high school, really got into it and loved it and was obsessed and would just spend hours just like hyper focusing on everything I could. And then when I got saved at 18 or 17, saved again, I was like, oh, I have to let this go. This is demonic. Like this is, you know, so I completely got rid of all my books, like got rid of everything, just never dove into it. So that was like the first thing that I jumped back into because I was like, I love this and I always have. So
what did the church tell you was wrong about astrology? What did they say?
I don't think I ever really questioned it. I just kind of knew that it was just not.
It wasn't Christianity.
It wasn't Christianity. Yeah. So
it's wrong.
Why exactly? So I never really was like, why can't I learn about astrology? I just kind of meh.
Yeah.
I'm so fascinated by astrology right now because I literally like thought it was bullshit when I was a Christian. And then when I deconstructed, I still thought it was bullshit. And then I realized that people love to talk about their zodiac signs and stuff. So I got into it. I found out what my moon and rising are. I started studying, like, you know, watching YouTube videos on what every sign, you know, their traits are or whatever. And now, like, it is literally so fun to talk about this stuff with everybody that you meet because everyone's into it. But the weirdest part for me is I started to like, you know, kind of had like open mind. I was like, I'm of the opinion that everything is probably a little bit true at least. Yeah. And, you know, a little bit wrong at least.
Yeah.
So I was like, let's see if any of this is true. And so I started researching all the stuff and then trying to guess people's zodiac signs. And it's kind of weird because I feel like just 2 days ago, I was at Stadium Swim and there's this chick in this group that we were all talking and stuff. And just the way she was talking, acting, I was like, are you a fire sign? And she was like, and she was wasted. So she's like, oh my God, yeah. How did you know? And I was like, are you a Leo? Cause I'm a Leo. So I know the most about Leos. And she's like, yes. And it's just so weird.
It's so weird. It's fun. I'm not as good as like guessing zodiac signs right away, but I usually can get the element right.
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel like you're a water sign somewhere. And even like TV shows that I get into, I'm like, what is their sign? And then go ahead and look up the actor and like you find out that you were right just based off of their like, you know, the way they act and talk
their
and
mannerisms
and
stuff.
all that. Yeah. So that's really fun.
Yeah. I just find it so funny that in what we were raised to believe about astrology, we were told it's evil, it's demonic, don't trust it. But why would God just put random stars in the sky that have no relation to us? Like, what are we supposed to just look at the sky and be like, oh, they're pretty? No, like that's how the Egyptians like charted things, and that's how Jesus was found in Bethlehem. You mentioned that before.
Yeah, like
so astrology is very important for us in our existence.
And I got to this point where I was like, God created everything, so how can it be bad? You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure there's people that can use it for bad things, but there's also people who use Christianity for bad things. So it's the same thing, like, you know, but there's good in everything. And so that's when I really started to give myself permission to like embrace it, because I'm like, God made this. And that's what I love about the birth charts, like learning, you know, all the stars that affected you when you were born, you know, what the solar system looked like, you know, the moment you were born, where each planet was. And, you know, that's exciting. Like, that's fun. And like, Christians make it a very big deal about, you know, you were formed in your mother's womb, you know, before you were even formed, God knew you and he called you, and nothing is by accident. Everything is. So I'm like, this even falls in line with that, where I'm like, yeah, your birth chart, you know, where the different planets were and why nothing's by accident. These are the planets that influence you. And this is why, like, you know, it's all a part of your story of how you are amazing and, you know, beautifully selected and all that. So I'm like, it goes all in line. Like, what is the issue?
Yeah. And it's kind of beautiful to feel like this connection and this unified feeling with the stars and the planets. It's beautiful that it's like we're all connected in some way.
Nature.
Because we are nature.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like literally stardust, right? Scientifically. Like,
stardust.
I don't know. I think that's just something girls say to feel pretty or something.
I don't know.
Just kidding.
What is it like from dust you were created though?
Yeah.
And dust you'll return?
Earth dust though. I don't know. I'm just
But
kidding.
is
No, I
it
think
earth
it's like we're
dust
made out of the
technically
same
stardust?
elements or something.
Mine just glitters. I don't care.
Okay, fine. You know what was really interesting too? So at that same thing I was at the other day, I was talking to this lady who is like an ER nurse, and it was the full moon. It was on the full moon, Sagittarius full moon 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about it, and I was just like, yeah, it's loading. What the hell? And she was like, yeah, I work in the ER and I don't know what it is. She's like, I'm not an astrology person per se, but every full moon, there is the weirdest shit that comes into the ER and it's crazy. It's always packed. It's always weird stuff. And
any people in customer service will tell you, and even like the people who don't believe in anything, but they will tell you on full moons, people act strange. And I'm like, what is that about?
Yeah, well, because most of our body is made up of water, and if the moon is in control of like the ocean tide, and our body is like made of 8% of water, then of course it's going to affect us.
I have a theory that I think it's just people who are unaware of themselves and unaware of their emotions and their body start to act out crazy, and they can't control it because they're unaware. You know, so it's usually, you know, you get a lot of homeless people that just wander into places and do weird shit, and you're just like, what is going on? But I think it's just that not being aware of, you know, your body and like what's happening.
Yeah.
And so for me, like learning about the full moon and what to expect is like really helped me understand myself and helped me like really own my emotions and own even my actions, you know, because I'm like, okay, I'm feeling this way. Why? And just asking those questions. And I think it's all been beneficial.
Being self-aware that there's something happening. Yeah, that's interesting. Do you guys know your moon and risings?
I do.
Okay, tell us your, not your chart, but your sun, moon, and rising.
Okay, so I'm a Libra sun.
Yes,
and
we love
then
Libras.
And then a Scorpio moon.
Ooh, okay.
And then a Leo rising.
Scorpios.
Leo rising. I see your Leo rising for sure. And then Melina.
Zach, what's mine again?
You're a Pisces.
Yeah, I know I'm a Pisces, but what's my moon and rising?
You're a Taurus moon and a Libra rising.
That's right.
A Taurus moon and a Libra rising. That's fun. Those are both Venus, ruled by Venus signs, Taurus and Libra. So you have a very like love aesthetics, love a good, comfortable place. Like you
yes, I love making a home.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I love making things
That's really
cute and like top of the line.
Yeah. Yeah, and all about love and romance and all that.
And expensive.
It's quality, though. It's quality.
That's true.
Yeah, it's quality. It's not that it's expensive.
That's true.
I need expensive things.
The best.
Yeah, we just want something we don't have to buy again in 6 months.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I love the moon and rising because I think you guys know what so like your moon is basically your inner world, your emotions.
Yes.
So that's what, when your sign is in, whatever your sign is how you process, you know, on the inside. And then your rising is, of course, how you show yourself, how you present yourself to the world or your mask to the world. So I just think that's so cool because I'm like, I learned so much about myself in that way.
Yeah.
And you know what's so annoying about that is because all the people that are like zodiac sign doubters, they're always like, well, I'm nothing like my zodiac sign. I'm like, well, bitch, do you know your moon and rising? And they're like, no, what's that? And I'm like, well, then of course you don't. You're not.
Yeah, it makes so much more sense we can't be confined to one sign.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're actually all the signs. It's just the percentages are different for each person depending on where the planets are.
And
my friend told me, I'm so sorry, but my friend told me that even just depending on what planets you're aligned with, you can actually have certain features. Like, so if you're a Pisces or you're a Leo, you have certain like actual physical characteristics.
Physical features,
yeah. It's like maybe big eyes. I forget which one has like these big,
usually water
beautiful
signs,
eyes.
Most of them all, but like Scorpios and Pisces for sure are usually have those big, like watery eyes. Tauruses usually have thicker necks. or broader shoulders. It just depends, you know. It depends on the influence of the sign. But yeah, it's kind of cool.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Do you guys know anything about like, so the one thing I literally know zero about is like your houses. You have like certain amount of planets in each house or something like that?
That's what I'm still diving into because there's so much. Like I'm still
it's
learning.
Like another layer of complication.
Really exactly.
I'm like,
weird. Okay. But I love it.
I have a lot of Virgo in my chart, even though I'm a Leo, and I think it makes me confused a lot.
I have a lot of Capricorn in my chart, which I feel like creates this like inner battle with me because my air sign wanting to be free and like go with the flow and spontaneous. And then my earth sign like influence is like, bitch, plan some shit, get organized.
That's why I love Capricorns.
Yeah.
I need that.
Inside my body, I'm like, trying to kill myself.
Yeah, I feel like I definitely have some things that like jerk me two different directions. But like since I'm a Leo, so I've been waiting for you guys to ask my moon and rising, but you didn't. So it's okay.
Yeah, what's your moon and rising?
Oh, thank you guys. Oh, I'd love to tell you. So like Leo sun.
Leo.
But what's worse is I'm a Sag moon, so I'm Sagittarius moon, double fire, but a Cancer rising. Aww. So that's kind of confusing because Cancer's a water sign.
Yeah.
So it like kind of goes against my other two. But I think I read somewhere that cancers or like water signs have really round faces. And then I looked in the mirror, I was like, damn it, I think I have a round face.
You start seeing yourself
the
as like...
beard helps contour your face, so you're good.
Man, without this, I look faglitious, as our friend Benjamin says.
So, okay, you got into astrology, right?
Yes.
When you were just giving yourself permission to explore what you really loved.
Yeah.
But what else did you have to explore? I know we talked about earlier that you kind of had to do shadow work.
Oh, yeah.
So was that the time?
Tons of shadow work.
And can someone describe what that means for people that probably don't know what shadow work is?
So shadow work refers to like your shadow self, which is the part of yourself that you don't like to show, the part of yourself you like to hide away. Like you definitely would never talk about these things on a first date, right? This is the stuff that you, this is just for
your
like
worst qualities
kind of those things that you know you need to work on, but you're kind of like, And so I didn't know the term was shadow work. I was just, you can call it inner work, you can call it whatever you want. But that was like a huge thing for me because in Christianity, I relied on Jesus to fix everything. So I'm like, Jesus will find it. He'll remove it. You know, if he brings it to my attention, then I know that it's something he's going to heal. And that's literally what I believed. And so with shadow work, it's like, no, honey, this is all you and you have to dive into this. Right. You have to deal with this. You have to heal. You have to have the breakdowns at work and go in the bathroom and cry. Like you,
you have to take responsibility for this part of who you are
exactly, now. And own it and not curse it and demonize it. And, and suppress it, you know, embrace it and heal it and love those parts of yourself until it's brought into the light. It's brought into.
I even think about how Jesus was a great example of what it means to love the sinner, right? He never like rebuked the prostitute or the tax collector. He just loved them. And yeah, there's parts of their lives that needed healing and needed to change. And he didn't like deny that and be like, oh no, you can stay the same. Like he wanted people to grow and progress and heal. Right. So I think it's the same thing like that we have to do for ourselves.
Absolutely.
And we don't do that very often.
And the irony about it all is that if you don't do the inner work, if you don't heal those parts, then it's impossible for you to love someone at their worst because you're still holding yourself in that place.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a huge one for me because I was so critical and judgmental of everyone because I was critical and judgmental of myself. So once I healed that criticism in myself, then I could be like, you know what? She's a little wild, but she's going to get there. And I had grace for people that I never had as a Christian. Imagine that. And so I'm like, wow, this is how you love people. You love yourself.
That is like the most true thing I've ever heard come out of someone's mouth because it's true. Yeah. We cannot love other people well if we have a self-hatred towards ourselves. Absolutely. It's just not possible.
It's not possible. You cannot give love that you do not have. And that's what I would say is why shadow work is the most important, because if you want to, you know, love your children, love your spouse, love your parents, anybody, like it has to be cultivated within you first. It has to.
And the most loving thing you can give to a person that you are trying to express or show love to in any way is like a healthy relationship with yourself.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's so easy to be frustrated with yourself when you're triggered very easily. Like for me, I definitely am a hot-tempered Latina woman. So if you piss me off, I'm about to like go off on you.
Right. And
I'm a fighter. You know, it's part of my traits just from how I was raised. Probably it's in my blood. It's in my genes. But it's one of those things I never liked about myself. And I'd always just dismiss it. And I wouldn't even really want to talk about it. I just want to be like, oh, I fucked up, whatever. Yeah. But now it's like so hard, but I'm doing it. I'm doing the work. I'm starting to hold myself accountable and ask myself questions like, why did you react that way? What is it that you're trying to protect and guard? And the deeper you go into those questions and really evaluate and ask, which is why I love full moons, which is why I love new moons, because that's my time to really self-reflect and to go inward and to really process those things that I want to shed and let go of. And they still come up. Like I still have triggers, but what's beautiful about doing shadow work or inner work is those reactions become less intense. You start being more aware of them with non-judgment. You're like, you go, oh, I had a freak out moment. I'm a little bit crazy right now.
What is this telling me?
All right. That's okay. I'm not mad at myself for that. Let's explore this. What's going on?
Right.
You know, and if you can do that for yourself, you can do that for other people. Absolutely. And that's the way that you handle people.
That's it. That's the key.
And I'd say if you don't do that for yourself, then you can't really do that for other people too. And you know, like the shadow work thing, like is like a big one for sure. And I think it's like, when you first come to that place, you know, where maybe your faith is starting to change. I know for me, I kind of felt like the things I needed to work on in my life, my shadow work stuff was going to be stuck with me forever because, you know, in a way, I think in my mind, I didn't even realize I was, viewing myself as in like the Holy Spirit in me was holding back all these horrible, sinful desires. And, you know, I was going to, if I lost that, I was going to, you know, freak out and go crazy and become like the worst of the worst or whatever. But really, like what you're describing is basically the shift of that responsibility from being on God or like the sanctification process, which unless you're studying that yourself and really diving into what the Bible's saying, the way it kind of gets taught is you just need to pray and you need to read your Bible and you need to walk close to Jesus.
And you need to serve more.
And then you will
be around good people.
Then you will be transformed because that's what sanctification is. You know, you're becoming more like Jesus. But when that doesn't happen, you know, it creates confusion and then you go through that deconstruction and then it feels like you're going to be stuck, but really the door gets open for the first time to truly face your shit for yourself. And that's a powerful freedom.
And it's like, we were talking about this last night, but I'm like, it's tough work, but it's my work. And I'm so honored now. Whereas before I would have felt like, oh, why do I have to do all this? Like, can't Jesus just take it away? But I'm like, no, this is my house to clean up. This is my mess to go and like straighten up. And we talked about like making like your body and your mind, your temple, basically your home, your dwelling place. And so it's like, it's your job to go in and go into those rooms that you haven't been into since you were a kid and turn the light on and figure out what's going on in there and clean up and, you know, deal with those emotions, deal with those traumas, those, you know, everything that you've been stuffing and hiding. And I'm like, I'm so honored to be able to, you know, go inward and be able to be proud of the work that I'm doing for myself. And I'm grateful to God for that because I'm like, you know, God being, you know, the loving, all knowing source, you know, would want that for us.
And, you know,
who would take that away from their children of like, you know, I'm going to do everything for you. So you don't really know the value of the work that you're putting in yourself, you know? So
I posted this today on my Instagram story, which is exactly what we're talking about. Throw away the idea that you will always be happy after serious healing has taken place. Low points are natural and they do not mean you have gone backwards. What shows your progress is not reacting to old triggers with the same intensity as before and knowing not to judge yourself when your mood is turbulent or heavy. I thought that was so like reassuring for me because like even a few days ago, I was like triggered and I like had a freak out moment and blew up on Zack. And I kind of wanted to feel kind of guilty and ashamed. But at the same time, I do recognize that I am making slow progress.
Changes.
Yeah. And I'm not going to necessarily be happy once I'm like fully healed. Like I can choose to be happy even in the mess, even when my moods are turbulent. And, you know, everyone's moods are turbulent a little bit when it's a full moon. So like, It just is what it is.
Kind of interesting about that, what you're saying too, is it's like, I think one of the things that like an idea, I guess I'm kind of exploring right now when it comes to like God and my relationship to this world and this reality is the fact that like we really do need contrast in our lives to appreciate the good things.
Yes.
You know, like low points are not bad because you wouldn't know what the high points were without the low. And you know, we hear that in church sometimes and stuff too. There's peaks and valleys and all that thing. Yeah. But like truly. It was still,
I feel like, because I remember talking about that, like, you know, you have your mountaintop experiences and sometimes you're in the valley, but maybe it's just me, but I never really took time to sit in the valley. It was always like, get through the valley so you can get to,
like, you need to get out of it as fast as possible.
You know what I mean? And I've heard it like, you go from glory to glory, but in between the glory is this thing, but it's like, yeah, hurry up and get through it. Like, get to the next glory.
Which is such a shame because, like, you know, I think all of us kind of fall into the same probably circle of some type of belief that like we are in a sense like the divine existence of God. Right. Like, whereas before we saw God as outside of us, we now recognize we are, you know, we come from God and we are in a sense like divine ourselves. Right.
Absolutely.
And like the way that we experience that divinity, the way we experience that godness that we are is by experiencing the difficulties of living, you know, in our humanity.
How can you comprehend big without small? How can you comprehend infinite without finite?
And what if God, you know, whatever God is, what if that being existing eternally past in perfection, the one thing that God could not experience in that state is what it would be like to become God. I was actually talking about this with another guy at that cabana party.
Okay, I need to go to the next cabana party.
I was just like probably like drinking a little bit, going around, you know, talking about all this weird shit with everybody. But we were talking about it and I was saying like, like this place feels like paradise, right? Like there's beautiful people everywhere, drinks, pools, friends, it's fun, music, all of it. But like, if you were just existed in that like perfect place for all of your life and it went for eternity past.
If life was a party forever,
it would not be fun.
No,
it wouldn't be paradise. It wouldn't end like this whole thought that maybe we are God learning to experience ourselves, you know, reality, you know, experiencing itself through this existence, you know, is like a really weird and interesting thought that I've been like kind of exploring a little bit lately.
Which is why everyone needs to watch The Good Place.
I'm literally
best show ever.
The last episode. I'm like, that's it. Sorry, it spoke right to me, and I was like, "That's it, right there."
Like, this makes the most
sense. That's the
gospel. I got saved for real, but like, no, we need all the experience, and that's basically what it was. It's like if you chase perfection, you're missing out on parts of God or parts of life and parts of this experience.
Of discovering your godhood, right? Your divinity.
That's the whole point of life is experience. To experience as much as you possibly can experience, the full spectrum and the full contrast of everything.
Or like, I think maybe it has more, I mean, that is definitely a great thing to do. But in my mind, I see it as like, your job on this earth is to discover yourself.
Absolutely.
You know,
Amen.
And not everybody's going to have a crazy life where you get to travel the world and have all these experiences and meet people from all these diverse backgrounds. Like we all want that. And, you know, hopefully we all start to get that more and more.
Right.
But even if you don't get that, if you go through the, you know, everyday life and find peace in that and discover yourself through that, I think that is the beautiful process. 'Cause, you know,
that is the experience. The experience is fully being you. That's fully the experience. Because no one can be fully Troielle and no one can be fully Milena or Zack. Like this is my experience. This is my life. Take responsibility for it. Experience all the emotions, the depression, the anxiety, the laughter, the joy, the partying. What makes it
so, and like, that's what helps me even chase my dreams is I'm like, yeah, this has been done before. So sure, this song has been sung about this before, but it's never been Troielle experiencing this. And that's what makes it like unique. That's what makes it like mine. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, we can all do it and there's room for everybody, but this is my experience, you know? And that's just kind of like, I can do this, you know? Like it kind of like, I don't know.
Wow.
I love that.
And who knew that shadow work would get us to this point of being able to really appreciate where we're at today?
So grateful for it.
Me too.
So grateful for it.
I'm still working through my shadow work.
You always will be. You'll never stop. But But it's, again, like I said, it's your work. It's it's beautiful to look back and say, oh, look what doesn't trigger me anymore. Look what I've like gotten past. Look what doesn't take me into a spiral of depression. Look what doesn't, I can see past this. And so then you get a little momentum going, right? You're like, okay, what else can I work on? All right, what's this about? And
you're no longer a victim.
Yes.
Now you're like the savior of your own life.
Now and nothing has power over you anymore. Yeah. The more that you do that. Well, what would you guys say to somebody that is, listening and is like, wow, I feel like I need to do shadow work. Like, how would they start doing that?
I would say a good way to do shadow work is to decide what you want in life, whether it's like right now or 10 years down the road. So I want to buy a new car. Okay. What's stopping you from getting that new car? Well, I can't get my finances in order. I feel stupid. There's the shadow work. There's whatever's keeping you.
Self-limiting beliefs,
diving into that. Why can't I do this? Or why can't I find love? Or why don't I feel worthy? Why don't I feel attractive? Why don't I feel whatever? And diving into that work instead of just being like, I don't feel it. And, calling it a day, like diving into that. And
that is incredible advice.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense too, because like literally what you believe about yourself, I think like in one way or another ends up creating your reality.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Like it's your whether it's just your perception or whether it literally creates the circumstances in your life. We create out of the source of it is how we feel about ourselves,
yep.
And so when we go in and do that inner work, a lot of times, you might have that end goal in mind, but I love that you're saying like, yeah, you want the car, but what are the things that you believe about yourself? Mm-hmm. Like, cause I feel like that's kind of where it all comes down to. And if we believe that we're not worthy, we're not smart enough, we're not attractive enough, we're not athletic enough, we're not this or that, then you believe that and you're already saying, I can't have that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But if you deal with those things, you open up the possibilities.
And that's another like red flag issue I have with Christianity is that a lot of times it puts people into this mindset or this frame of mind that I'm not worth much. I'm only good because he is good. I'm only good because he saw value in me.
Oh my gosh.
And so it's like, if you come from that place, I don't care what you try to go after. If you have that mindset, guess what? You're going to stay. Like you're going to stay in that realm of I'm only good because of this. You're not going to pull good things towards yourself because you don't see yourself the way you should. Mm-hmm. And so that was another reason why I couldn't like fully get back on board, because I'm like, I see myself too differently now. Like I see the God in me. I see divine in me. I see myself, the way I'm supposed to. And now I'm like, I can't go back to that like limiting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You see divine feminine in you.
Oh yeah.
Which honestly, not every church, because we came from the last church that we were at really empowered women, really did. Like they're like, women should be pastors. Women should be on stage leading and doing what they should do best.
Yeah. And I came from a church that way too. So I'm grateful
that's
for
good.
That.
But my upbringing did not. So when I was contemplating going back to, the way things were, I couldn't anymore because I finally found my power and my strength and my feminine
some autonomy.
Power. Yeah. It was really hard to go backwards.
Well, what that kind of comes down to too is something that I think most people can relate with, which is allowing other people to create your beliefs about yourself instead of you discovering it for yourself. Because, if we let other people create our beliefs or determine what we believe about ourselves, we are like literally giving our whole identity over to a process that has, no truth necessarily attached to it. We believe, what we believe about ourselves based off, social media, based off what people have said. Mm-hmm. But when you come into that power where you're like, no, I'm going to, really start to discover who I am, sit with myself, listen to those voices that encourage me to love myself. Mm-hmm. Like it makes a big difference in your life.
It does.
I agree.
Well, we're in this, guys. Like we're growing. We're making progress every day.
We are.
Yeah.
And it's like, sometimes I feel like stupid where I'm like, God, I wonder where I would have been if I would have started this a long time ago. But then I have to like appreciate exactly where I am right now in this moment and remain present.
Yeah, because our past is just contrast to help us really appreciate where we are today.
Oh, that's so good. That's good.
Back to contrast.
I love that.
That is very true.
So you can't regret your past.
No.
Because you need the past to be able to appreciate
where you are right now. That's so good. And that's true. Oh, I love that.
Me too.
Yeah, amazing. So I feel like it's a really cool thing to just kind of have been able to, express the difficulties of like this process of your faith changing. But like for people who might be listening because they're going through something similar, I love that like the conclusion of all this is that there's freedom on the other side.
Absolutely.
And that like all of your worst existential dread fears, like you face them only to discover that there's like a whole world, existing that you never knew. And then all of a sudden you're like, I get the movie The Matrix now. And then,
Fuck
like,
yeah.
Literally.
For real. And, like we say it, on a few of the other podcasts and stuff, but like really, I think the experience for all of us has been not like your faith crumbling into nothing, but your ability to have faith, in so much more than just one set belief system and know the truth out of everything, be able to pull the truth out of everything, out of every culture, out of every belief system, and to see the ways that, maybe these belief systems becoming like literal systems,
right.
You don't need to necessarily embrace all that. And I think like the world opens up to you instead of it feeling like your world's crumbling.
It's a more well-balanced and holistic way of viewing the world,
life
and life in general,
and other people and other belief systems. And I think in a way I'm grateful for my Christian journey or my journey in Christianity because I'm learning a lot. Like I dove really into like head first into spirituality, all of it. I was like, what is this about? What's that about? I want to know about it all. And like in Christianity, they say there's a phrase where they say, chew the meat and spit out the bones, or like, you take what resonates with you and leave. You don't have to receive everything that everyone's doing. And so I used to believe that wholeheartedly. Like when you get prophetic words in Christianity and you're like, I don't really feel like that was really for me, I'm not going to really receive that. Well, it's the same thing with like going to see psychics or going to, see mediums or whatever. It's like you have to go with what resonates with you. And so I'm just grateful that I had that upbringing because now I'm like, I can navigate this. Like I got this. I kind of got that little foundation where I'm like, I have to rely on my intuition. I have to rely on what resonates with me. And, people are going to give you stuff all the time and it's your job to decipher like that's for me. And actually that's not really for me.
Yeah. And I really love that because it's like when you come out on the other side, you don't have to be like this whole radically different person. Like, like when I still spend time with the friends in our lives now, like not only a very few people are like are Christians that are our actual friends that we spend time with, regularly. And there's still this sense that like, I can hold on to some of those values that I, was brought up with my Christian faith,
Absolutely.
And it still like makes an impact on people. There's still like this sense of like, hey, you want to do this? It's like, no, I'm good. Like I'm more focused on these things in my life. And that's why I don't want to do that. And people are like, oh, damn. Like, okay, maybe I should be. And like, that was kind of the experience sometimes as a Christian where you're like, oh no, I'm not going to watch the movie or do that thing. And,
right. Because what.
Yeah, so you still can have that like that ability to affect the world around you and change it for good and change it, into positivity and bring life to the people around you.
Absolutely.
But what you lose is that obligation to feel like those people are enemies because they don't have the same faith as you.
Right.
And I have found that to be like one of the things I appreciate the most about where we're at.
Or even just like feeling like it's your responsibility to save them.
For sure.
Because then that enables like, the whole savior complex and like, well, I ran into this person, their life is such a mess. And if I don't give them Jesus, like who will? That was my opportunity. You know how many times I've like beat myself up over like meeting someone and not leading them to Christ in that moment. And like,
are they going to go to hell forever?
Exactly.
Because my faith wasn't sharp.
Enough.
I wasn't ready in season and out of season.
Exactly. And now I'm like, you know what? Everyone's on their journey and all I can do is be authentic and true to myself and enjoy the freedom that I have gotten for myself and hope that that inspires someone to wake up in their journey.
And you can also be inspired by their journey now.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they're not bad. They're not heathens. They're not, sinners. They are people on their journey.
Look, when I left church and I went to work at a hotel, it was a little rinky-dink resort that changed my whole life. I met some of the most beautiful people that I would have never given the time of day as a Christian. 100%. And they were like the same experience. Younger than me. And they were like, had lived crazy lives. And I found myself leaning on them for emotional support, And I was just blown away. And you can't really tell people like, wow, I would have thought you didn't know anything when I was a kid. But like, I really felt, and I was like, how are you giving me wisdom right now? And like, wiping my tears and telling me it's going to, like, how is this happening right now?
They're ministering to you.
Literally,
right?
Literally ministering. Atheists. Like giving me the love of God. How does that happen? It was beautiful. And
that's why I just will love and appreciate anybody that is being their true, authentic self, because you're living in your purpose when you're being exactly who you truly are.
Yeah.
Anytime you start to perform to be something that you're not, or to gain someone's approval, you're not living in your purpose anymore.
Yeah.
And that's why you can fall in love with those people that you meet and cross paths with, even though their view on life is completely different than yours, because they're being truly themselves in that moment.
To themselves, and it's real and it's raw. And I feel like that's where God is like in those real raw moments where it's not perfect. Sometimes it's a little messy. It's a little ugly, but it's like, it's right there. It's real. It's present. It's right now. It's us being ourselves without any hindrance or trying to be like somebody else or model like somebody else or get anyone's approval. I love it.
I love it too.
I love that it applies no matter what you believe, you take on those rules in your life where you're like, I'm not modeling myself after, my whole personality after anyone. I'm going to accept myself and then just learn from these people around me. Like that's something you can do whether you're Christian, whether you're agnostic, atheist, or believe anything else,
Yeah.
But man, I love
guys,
you guys.
we just flowed so good just now. We were just like, bum, 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 bum. It just like wouldn't stop. Like we just kept going. It was great.
And what's great is that these are our conversations
all the time. Anytime we get together, this is how, like, honestly, everyone's just seeing what we already talk about.
Literally.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up then, right?
Yeah.
We're very proud of you.
Thanks, Troielle. You're the best.
One last thing, though.
Yes.
Tell us what you're starting.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Okay. So, for those who know, I did have a podcast with some of my very best friends called Holy Trash Podcast. And that was all about our deconstruction journey. And it was just really a conversation. And so.
But why was it called Holy Trash again? It was like throwing the trash.
Pretty much, like we were trashing ideas that we no longer believed, that no longer served where our new mindset was. So we go over different topics every week, and you guys came on one of our last episodes. But so we are ending Holy Trash, and we are beginning something new, which is called Alchemy House, and it's basically just a house that supports transformation. So we're going to start doing events and just host little. Nights that we go inward and we do a lot of shadow work. We do a lot of meditation. But what I wanted to do was just host all things spiritual and just see where people connect. So maybe you would have never thought to look into Reiki because you're like, I don't know what that's about. Like you can go to Alchemy House and learn a little bit about the basis of Reiki or meditation. We got art therapy. We got NLP. We got learning how to manifest, just different things. And I just want it to be kind of like a spiritual hub, so to speak, just to help
a safe
people.
Place too.
Yeah, a safe place to really become your best self, your authentic self, whatever your journey looks like. And just to help give people the tools and the support to be able to do that. So we're so excited. We did our first event in May, just a couple weeks ago. And we're going to have another one coming up in a couple weeks of just hosting beautiful people. We're going to start locally, but we do want to eventually go online. So I'm just excited.
So cool. I'm excited
that sounds great.
Honestly. You said a long time ago on our podcast, or not a long time ago, but when you were on there, you said deconstruct to reconstruct. And so we really feel like Alchemy House is us reconstructing, where we are now and where we hope to bring people into is just a place of freedom and
that's so cool. Is there like an Instagram?
There is an Instagram, Alchemy House LV. So follow us and just keep up to date. And we're going to be sending out newsletters monthly just to keep everybody, on the same page. But I'm excited.
That's
so
awesome.
excited.
I'm so excited too to be a part of it.
Yes, I
can't wait.
Can't wait. We got some fun stuff planned.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Troielle. You are such a light, such a bright, amazing personality, and we are so grateful to have you in our lives.
Thank you.
And thanks for sharing all that you have with
for having me
on the podcast today. Yeah, of course. Again, soon for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, we love you all. Thanks for coming and listening to another episode. Stay tuned for more stuff to come, and peace out.
Bye.